We already had so many topics here on stage, quite some in-depth discussions, and it's very lovely to see that there's still so much energy in the room and that you're still eager to use this opportunity with so many valuable connections here in the room. I'm sure, I always think the unofficial part is so crucial in each conference, and it looks like you're really making the best of it. Now, I think it was Kerr this morning who talked about the impact stories and how important it is to really focus on the value creation, on the business case when it comes to digitalization and sustainability, because let's be honest, in the end, this is what sells all projects in the companies and is really crucial for adoption of great visions such as the Battery Pass. And this is exactly what we'll focus on now in the remaining block this afternoon. We have, again, a great presentation. Then we have 3 impact stories, really actual stories, how the Battery Pass blueprint is already being put into effect in 3 different perspectives. And then we'll have a closing discussion. So, let's focus exactly with what I mentioned, the economic case for battery passports with 2 speakers. Dr. Sven Jansen, he's the Director of Government Affairs at Umicore. Umicore also a key player in the Circular Economy Initiative I already mentioned earlier. A huge company, I think more than 1,700 employees worldwide when it is about circular material technology. I think earlier we heard some questions about recycling and some blind spots. I think that's something that you guys are also operating in that space. So I'm curious what you cooked up with, and he will not be presenting by himself. Janan Kölner will join him. She is the Battery Pass project lead at Systemic and also an expert in circular economy as such. I think Sven will do the beginning. Welcome on stage.
All right, nearly a lost time accident here. About 12,000 people in Umicore, not 1,700, but no matter. No worries. No nerdy stuff now, so don't worry, after lunch I'll try to keep it easy for you. I need to click the button, right? Okay. So talking about value and battery passport. So value is apparently very, very relative term, right? If I asked you guys what is value, how do you define value, what would you say? Just shout. I mean, what is value? Money, okay. There's no wrong answers, by the way, I promise. Anything else?
How valuable it is for me.
I didn't hear it, but it was right. Anything else? We'll actually have it down there. You saw that earlier in the content guidance, the data, the information we get from a battery passport. That's the context. Okay, context defines value. You take the example of a glass of water that you have in your office, which is maybe 10 cents of value. You take that same glass of water in the desert where you have been for 3 days, nothing to drink, you will pay any price for it, right? So that is exactly what a battery passport will do. It will specify the value for us. So the value of a battery that we have in front of us, so we know what we are talking about. So that creates a lot of awareness. It creates learning. It gives us insights. And that is the second aspect to value and battery passports, means that it will help us to retain value. Because what we want and what the idea is that battery passports, what they will do, will take us from a linear economy to a circular economy. What does that mean? It means that it will help us to make things reversible. So we have reversible products, reversible processes. It will make us quality-driven more than quantity-driven. It will make us keeping access to resources versus losing access to resources. So that is where retaining value based on learning curves, so the stages of learning, you may be aware of that, from we don't know what we don't know to we know what we know. That is where a battery passport or a DPP in general in the future will take us towards. And that will give us a situational awareness of the product. So it comes along with its CV. It tells us what it is, what it's all about, with the static and dynamic data we will have. And this is only the beginning, right? This is only the 90 data points that we've heard earlier about, which are stipulated in the batteries regulation. But if we take the GBA work, where we work on additional ESG issues, more rule books to come, we can put any kind of data in there in the future and creating even more value. So another aspect of value and battery passports is it will help us to boost value, to increase value. How is that? It will create business partnerships because it makes us work together, because the things are not be put into practice if we don't work together. So collaboration, more integrated ways of working along the value chain, that's what we need to do. That's what we already have started with. The consortium here is just one idea. There's many more multi-stakeholder organizations in place and more to come. So we need to do that together. That's one thing. It will make us more competitive because it will force level playing fields and it will make us compete on innovation. And that's what we want in business, right? That's where we are good at. And another aspect is partnerships I already mentioned, is sustainability, because it's an ESG management tool in the upstream, and it will make us more sustainable. Sustainability as an additional driver, as an additional dimension, if you will, in making us not only commercially and technical, but also ESG-wise more competitive. And a fourth aspect on value that it will create is, and I've forgotten it now, so let me take my notes, because I try to not bother you with too many slides, and that's why I was thinking to more talk than present you something. Excellence, business excellence, of course. I mean, smart cost positions, right? So helping us to adapt our processes, making them reversible, and by that boosting even our excellence. And that is also something that we typically do most efficiently working. That is what businesses are all about. And that's, if we all of that do together, that is what will help us increase the value, boost value, retain value, and take us from linear economies to circular economies. I think there is a second slide that I should talk about, and this one. And that is a bit about the methodology of battery passports. I mean, how do they function? So in the upstream, you could say it's kind of an ESG management tool. It will make things more transparent, more visible. It will help create a level playing field. In the downstream, it will kind of serve as a complexity management tool. When we get batteries back, all of these different types of batteries, I think the best surprise is no surprise in business, and we want to know what we get back. And kind of, if we have the battery that we need to disassemble, that we need to pre-treat, that we need to then recycle, the more information we have, the better we can pre-treat it, the more efficient we can design our recycling processes, no matter which technology we use, and the more we pre-sort and reduction of assembly, because we have the information already, that will make us much more efficient and again save costs and so forth. So it will certainly do one thing. It will make secondary raw materials more affordable and more available, and that is certainly something that we desperately need. And then in the round stream, I'm over time already? Okay, and in the round stream, it will, yeah, as I said, it will also safeguard that we kind of align the R strategy so that we don't start competing, but thinking about what can we do when. So not recycling for the sake of recycling because there is a recycled content, a quote that we need to fulfill, but do whatever makes the most sense and gets the most value out of a battery. So aligning our strategies and not competing, so more and less or. And what else do we have on the slide here? Yeah, digitalized value chains. What does it mean? I mean, all we have heard today, it will force us to kind of self-reflect what we do. I mean, now we all are asked to look at our data, at our processes, get these data up and running, ready, so that we all together work on compiling them so that they can end up in a battery passport for a defined target group. And imagine there can be way more target groups in the future with many different data that we aggregate differently. So I think the battery passport itself, that's only the peak of the iceberg. What we need to do is we need to think bigger. Bigger is the underlying system, and the underlying system will be able to do all these things that we have talked about. We can link the DPP systems to customs IT systems, so functionalizing these things in order to prevent leakage of batteries out of the EU, so that we can recycle these critical and strategic raw materials here. All of that should be possible, and all of that, I think, is in the back of the minds of the people in the Commission. We've heard these things already in discussions. And I think that is, if we want to get a taste for value and battery passports, that's what I wanted to share with you. And over to Canan.
Yeah, thank you, Sven, very much for setting the big picture and getting everyone on board about what value can mean. And what I would like to do with you now is to briefly take you to some of the work that the Battery Pass Consortium has conducted, and which is also, like amongst everything else that has been discussed and presented already today, is I think very important for each and every one of you who's coming with a business lens on it, which we call the value assessment. Giving you a bit of context, what we have done is that we looked at the value chain step by step and identified those cases where we think that battery passports can add value and do add value beyond compliance. Some of them are very obvious, very direct, getting out of the mandatory requirements as the legislation is today. And some of them are a bit more hidden. They're a bit more hidden because they're depending on enabling conditions that come out of these mandatory requirements, such as data aggregation or process integration. We have doubled down on 3 of these use cases. We have in-depth given a qualitative description of them and also have initially started to quantify them. Again, back to the question, what is value? Money obviously is one of them, but there are a few more behind. And what I would like to do with you now is to guide you through these, briefly guide you through these 3 use cases that we have here. One of them is a question that has been posed by Yumiko already in the morning. I'd like to get back on that. It's the end-of-life collection of batteries. We are convinced that battery passports can help to increase the batteries that are getting back to the market. Giving you a bit of context, an issue that was also mentioned in the morning is that there is a huge amount of cars, of vehicles that are where people don't know where they are. And around 40% of these vehicles with unknown whereabouts are getting exported illegally. And 50% of these vehicles with unknown whereabouts are getting treated illegally. And this, of course, at the one hand side is a massive loss of materials, especially with raising EV shares. It's a loss of materials that would be, or of batteries that would be available for a second life application, of materials that would be available for recycling. And it's, of course, a huge risk to the environment in terms of pollution and to social health in terms of people who are working in these illegal treatment facilities. And if battery passports are well connected to the deregistration processes of vehicles, for example, and export control processes, this can significantly reduce the amount of vehicles and batteries getting exported illegally, making them available for the European market, and also helping Europe's battery value chain to be more independent. That's one of the cases that might not be as visible as the others are that we have here, but I think it's very important to have that present. Another one might be easier to understand, or might be quite straightforward when you think about the battery value chain, which is the determination of the residual value of a battery. Imagine you're going to buy a used car and someone is asking you how much money you would pay for it. You obviously would want to know a few data points, like what car is it, what engine does it contain, how many kilometers has it run. And the same obviously is true for batteries. And the value of a battery is going far beyond the economic value or the value in money that you would pay for it. It's also determining whether you are going to be able to use that battery in another context. So batteries passport can help to reduce costs at one side because you know what you get and you have to test less, but on the other hand also help to make batteries or more batteries available for a second life application. And another case that has been mentioned a few times already today is the recycling case. I think also that is quite intuitive. If you've got data available on the composition of a battery and got clear dismantling instructions, that obviously makes recycling of a battery more efficient. We have quantified it. It's around 10 to 20% of the annual costs, operational recycling costs that could get reduced annually by 2045, because you need to test less. Again, as before, if you know what's inside, you don't need to test for it. You can reduce your dismantling costs because you know how to dismantle, you can automate, you can optimize your processes, and you can also optimize the overall recycling process because you will probably have a more homogeneous feedstock, will have less contamination. And all of that, at the end, brings us to having more battery materials available for recycling, making the European battery value chain more independent of other players. And that's, I think, quite an important point. And it comes hand in hand with environmental savings as well. If you've got less primary material that need to be sourced, you obviously also have less carbon dioxide emissions, less pollution, etc. This is just to give you an initial glimpse of all the hard work and the thinking that has gone into it. And I would like you to take it as an idea for creativity, because at the end, every one of you, everyone's who have their own businesses need to think about what value means for you. This can be a starting point, but as we heard in the morning, and as Keo, for example, also stated, this is beyond imagination. There are many, many more use cases than the 12 that we have worked on, but they can be a starting point. What I would like to close with now is that call to action. Like, one of them is identify your strategic opportunities. I think that's very important. The second thing is that you're obviously assessing implementation requirements. And I think everyone's doing that already, that you know which software to use, you know which hardware to use, which data to collect from whom, and how you're going to manage it. Because as we heard in the morning as well, data management is going to be a huge portion of the work that's going into battery passports. And then you obviously need to operate the battery passport. And once you've got all of that done, you need to select your implementation strategies. Think about what are you going to do in-house and what are the changes that you might need to do for that. What are you going to do externally? Are you going to work with a third-party provider for battery passports, for example? How do you empower them? And at the end, where are you going to join forces with your industry peers? Because if you don't have to do it alone, it's much easier. So many questions to think about. Not all of them can be solved quickly, but as 2027 is less than 3 years ahead, I think it's important to tackle them. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Canan and Sven. 60 seconds for questions. Any quick questions for Canan or Sven? Anybody in the room? Hands up. No? Yes, please. Turn on the microphone and ask away.
Hi, I wanted to ask you about the end-of-life collection. So I'm from JLR in the UK, so we're an economic operator. One of the big challenges for us is to be able to follow the sort of breadcrumb trail of the vehicle. So we might sell it to a customer. They might sell it to another customer privately. Yeah. We have no visibility of that. So whilst I don't disagree with the benefits you've got listed there, have you thought about some of the challenges that for us as an economic operator we'd have to go through to follow that breadcrumb trail from customer to customer to customer?
I'm not sure whether we've been thinking about it explicitly, but it's more the question, or it's more a point that someone needs to think about it. And that and I think that's the major point behind, is that if you link different processes, you don't have the battery passport standalone, but you've got deregistration processes of a vehicle, for example, and export control processes. If you link them together, then you're going to be able to know where the battery is at the end. But if it just stands there alone, it's going to be difficult. But definitely an important question to tackle.
If I can add on to that a little bit. Hi, over here. So when we first started out and also talked about traceability, a lot of imagination was there in the room about avoiding, like physically being able to track locations of individual batteries. Right, so that you would know where vehicles are. And we say that is a problem in terms of GDPR, right? It's like, hey, I don't want to know, like, don't want the commission or anybody to know where my car is, aka probably me. The other thing is also that it's just technically not feasible, right? Because you can put a car into a container and all the signals gone, and they do disappear, right? I mean, it's no magic. And so those things, they will not happen, right? And it will not label the individual owner at any given time, right? Because again, that's a different type of regulation. That's not what it's for. No personal data included. I think that's also important, right? No personal data. But there is the points in which data needs to be updated. For example, at change of ownership, to actually update the data and use it. And so that is a point where that battery passport will, for example, get an update. Or change of status, aka would they be put into a second life, and then it changes owner also, right? And in those cases, JLR as an economic operator would get note of that effectively, and right, also transferring out of the EU, for example, or deregistration. Those are kind of pinch points, if you will, where that would write onto the battery passport and thus also give an indication on the person writing on it, right? And that helps, right? But it's not a, I know where all the vehicles are, right? And with stationary batteries, you know anyway, right? Because they're all linked up, so.
All right, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Janan Kölner and Sven Jansen. Here now. Perfect.